Yeah, so I'm going to give a presentation. I don't think it's particularly long. Might be stuff you already know. I don't know. But I think the meat of it all is Stewart is, well, let me tell you about Go Electric Colorado first. So we are a nonprofit and all volunteer, 100% volunteer, and our goal is to help electrify, sustainably electrify Colorado homes. And we do many things, but I think the thing that people know us for the most, and I think the most valuable thing we do, is we have volunteer coaches like Stuart who are absolute geeks about home electrification. And we give free consultations for people who want to electrify their homes. So you can go to Go Electric Colorado, sign up for a free consultation. So it starts out on the phone. Is that right? Or what do you do? Zoom? Phone?
Calendly, they go on our website,
Mm-hmm.
find the sign up link.
Mm-hmm.
Calendly looks at all of our schedules and schedules one of us.
But when you talk to them, do you talk to them on as a
Google
meeting
Meet.
call? Okay, Google Meet. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's sometimes enough. So someone might just have a question about a heat pump or weatherization or EV or who knows what. But then sometimes they'll go into people's homes if they have to. They need to do that and look at the whole home. We're sort of unique in that we look at the whole sort of ecosystem of the home. So if you want a heat pump and you just call someone in, bring them in for a heat pump, they aren't going to say, oh, well, you know what, your attic has no insulation, so why don't you do that before you get a heat pump, or else we're going to oversize it. They don't do that because that's not really what they do. But we look at the whole thing as a system. So even like EVs, which don't seem like they'd be a system to the home, but you've got your charger there. If you install a charger, maybe your panel will need to be upgraded, and we can tell you how to do it without upgrading the panel. So we do kind of do the whole thing. And then, which I think is almost more valuable, is that we will offer, once you have a consultation with us, your coach is your coach, and we offer ongoing guidance. So you can always just reach out to your coach with an email and say, hey, I got these bids, which one should I do? Or hey, I've got this problem, or whatever. So that's kind of the big thing we do. So Stuart is going to answer questions, whatever technical questions, anything like that you have about home electrification after I'm done with my presentation. Okay. Okay. So I should say average American's carbon footprint there. So your home is roughly a third of your carbon footprint here. So you can see 32% for your home, 28% for transportation, 26% stuff you buy. So stop going to Amazon and buying stuff. I do that, unfortunately. And 14% is food. Now, where does your household energy use come from? Well, over half of it is space heating. So if you want to take the biggest bite out of it, do something about your space heating. Another 20% is water heating. So those two are like a big, big chunk. Then air conditioning is really a small part, refrigeration, and then kind of a bunch of other things. Okay, so fighting climate change is very easy in principle. So we basically need to do two things. We need to electrify everything in a sustainable manner, sustainable, efficient manner, and switch to 100% renewable energy. So that's like almost everything right there. I mean, there's other things like agriculture and concrete and stuff, but that is the huge chunk. So on paper, it looks really easy. So going to talk first about electrifying your home. So I'm going to talk about steps to electrify your home. So the step one would be seal and insulate your home. So you want to do this before you, like, as I said, before you get your heat pump, etc. It's also often the lowest hanging fruit. So lowest hanging fruit as far as saving money and saving energy as well. So there's something called an energy audit, which you can get at Excel has one for like $150, which is basically, I think, what the incentives are. So it's almost free. And basically, they'll come in and they will look for leaks, for poor insulation, other things like that. So that's a good place to start, because who knows, maybe your home is fine. Maybe you don't need to do any weatherization. Maybe it's horrible. Maybe there's this one leak that's like really, really bad and you just don't know about it. So then you can have an expert seal and insulate your home. There are credits. This is kind of an old presentation, so they may have gone up, but $150 for energy audit and $1,200 for installation. So here's some energy auditors. Like I said, Excel Energy I think is the cheapest, but there are other ones as well. Okay, so this is, as I said, kind of the most important steps. So if you added up all the leaks, holes, and gaps in a typical home's envelope, the envelope is kind of the outside of the house, it would be the equivalent of having a window open every day of the year. So you don't realize you have that many leaks, but if you add it up, it really is a lot. 9 out of 10 homes are under-insulated, and like I said, it's a cost-effective thing to do. So step 2 is to install a heat pump. So I think you guys know what a heat pump is, but I'll just sort of explain the concept anyway. So if you like plug a space heater in the wall, at most the amount of energy that comes out of that wall is going to be the same as the energy that's used for heat. It can't be more than that because that would break the laws of physics. However, a heat pump does kind of break the laws of physics, because if you put in like 100 units, whatever they would be, you would actually get like 4 times as much heat. So how can that be without breaking the laws of physics? It's because it does not produce heat. It moves heat from one place to another. And so if you want to heat your home, it moves it from the outside into your home. If you want to cool your home, it moves the heat from your home back outside. And it seems a little counterintuitive when it's like 20 degrees out. How do you move the heat from outside to inside? But you can. It gathers up the heat, so to speak, and brings it in. So it replaces both your furnace and your air conditioner. So you're getting a 2-for-1 thing. So if you need to get both a furnace and an air conditioner, that's when you can jump up and down with joy, because now you only have to replace it with one. They tend to be 3 to 5 times more energy efficient. So they're kind of like the menorah in that sense. So there are 2 types of heat pumps. There are more, but 2 major types of heat pumps. So one is a central heat pump. So what that is, so your furnace is in your basement or wherever it is, right? And it goes through it produces heat and it goes through ducts around your house. So a central air heat pump would be basically you take out that furnace and you put in a heat pump and an outdoor unit as well, because it has to, take it from outside. So you have an outdoor unit that's sort of like a, kind of like what you have for your air conditioner, a little bigger. So that would be a central air heat pump. But you can also, if for some reason your ducts don't work that well, or you don't have any, or you just want a more efficient system, which these are, you can get mini splits. So these are just, where's your mini split?
That's in the couch there. I'll get it.
So anyway, they're just units that go on the wall. So they would just be this thing on the wall. They can also go in the ceiling. They can go on the floor. But basically they will heat that area. So you probably want more than one unless you have a tiny, tiny, tiny home. But they are more efficient because you do lose some in your duct work and things like that. Okay, picking a contractor. Okay, so we have noticed doing doing our consultations that a lot of times contractors, unfortunately, they make errors, and it happens a lot. It's new technology. Some of them don't know much what to do. They're a little bit more complicated than putting in a furnace. So you want to pick a good contractor. So here's some questions here. What percentage of heating systems use solar heat pumps? Will you do a heat load calculation? Okay, you don't know what that is, but basically a furnace, you can just stick in a big furnace, an oversized furnace that will heat 2 of your homes. You can just stick it in there, and that's fine. It goes on and off, and it doesn't really matter if it's oversized. That is not true for a heat pump. So you want to make sure that your contractor does the calculations to put in the right size of heat pump. Mm-hmm.
Why is that not true for heat pumps? Like, what does it matter if you have an oversized?
Well, an oversized system, first of all, it's more expensive. Secondly, if it's oversized, it has these cycles of doing things, basically, and it will not be able to finish its cycle if it's too big, and so it'll kind of stop, and so that makes it less efficient, and it'll also reduce the life of the heat pump.
Can I answer that?
Oh yeah, you do a better job. Yeah.
So that's a great question. So furnace is just a very simple mechanical device. Even the new modulating furnaces, they just blast on and blast off. Big temperature variance, you can have basically a 6-degree temperature swing, 6 to 8 degrees of temperature swing, even on the most modern gas units. The heat pump, especially the ductless one that I'm demoing here, and by the way, the industry term for these is Japanese heat pumps. Japanese developed the inverter technology in the late 80s, which just shows one more example of how far behind we are. So this modulates to within 1 degree Fahrenheit. To do that, it has to run a steady state gas compression cycle, expansion compression cycle. And it can only modulate back so much. All devices have a minimum power setting and a maximum power setting. So the minimum power wattage consumption that this thing can do, which represents the most it can modulate back and still be running a full refrigeration cycle, is the limiting factor. And so if you oversize the system, before it can complete its refrigeration cycle, it'll get the shut-off command because the room's at temperature already. And that interrupts the refrigeration cycle. The compressor does nothing else. The only thing the compressor can do is shut off. In other words, go to zero power consumption. And you can see that. I don't know if I could go far back enough. We encourage everybody, when you get into this, you put a power monitoring app on your compressor. We can watch it, and we watch for it's called short cycling. Short cycling is when the compressor is going to 0 voltage, zero amperage, and then starting back up again. And for any kind of rotating machinery, that's just generally not a good idea. And that will greatly increase wear and tear, increases your power consumption, decreases comfort because you don't get that 1 degree modulation that you're supposed to be getting. So it's really critical. I'm going to hand it back to Julia, but the traditional manual J's can often oversize by up to 100%. So one of the great services we do for you is you get your manual J from the guy, come back to your coach. Coach will look at it and say, okay, good. That's okay, or that's ridiculous. And then we'll rerun it using some of our software and come out with an exact number for you. So it's super critical to size the heat pump. You got to size the heat pump to the envelope. You have to look at your windows, your doors. We look at the square area of your windows, your walls, and do an accurate load calculation. And also, we like to use past energy data too. We look at the therms you're burning with gas because that's a snapshot of what your house needs to do. And we convert it into kilowatt hours. All right, Jim. Come back to that.
So anyway, next question. Will you test the existing ducts to make sure that they're big enough? So a heat pump actually needs slightly bigger ducts. Now, usually it's not a problem. You can kind of tell by the age of the home whether it might be a problem or not. Because I think the more modern ones really have big enough ducts, right?
Right. Yeah. So in the HVAC industry, it's called A before C, air before commissioning. You want to see him doing static air tests on the setup you've got to see how much air, because maybe you're putting in maybe your house demands a 3-ton heat pump. your ductwork may only be able to handle 2 tons worth of airflow. So,
Okay.
without modifications.
Is backup heat necessary? And if so, at what outdoor temperature will the heat pump switch over to backup heat? So let me dig a little bit more into this. So a heat pump, first of all, there are cold climate heat pumps now. Now, if you go and talk to some contractors, even now in 2024, they will say, "Oh, well, you can't have a heat pump in Colorado because they only go down to, whatever, 40 degrees or something," which is like, oh my God. I mean, that's like heat pumps from the south. But there are cold climate heat pumps now. However, they go down. It depends on the heat pump you get. They may go down to 0 degrees, or they may go down to minus 15 or whatever. So one of the things we find that contractors say, which is incorrect, is they will try to push you often to get what's called dual fuel, which means your heat pump will be working on its own down to a certain amount, and then something else will kick in. So gas backup or electric backup, which is expensive. Now, you may need that. It's not like you never need that, but you usually don't. And that's another thing that we can help you with, because you don't want to be doing that unless you have to. Now, one thing contractors do sometimes is they will have equipment in their storeroom that they want to get rid of that is not cold climate, or it's not very cold climate. So they'll try to say, "Oh, well, I'll just put this in, and then we'll just put in this gas backup thing." So there's a lot of things. This is why we exist.
Yeah,
Is to help you
the
from
biggest
this.
obstacle we have is the HVAC industry.
Have you participated in manufacturer training for the systems that you would install? Do you help in applying for available credits and rebates? So some contractors do, and that's great, because then you don't have to go and track them all down. There are a lot of different ones. There's federal and state and city and utility and things like this. Do you provide a warranty? And will you do necessary permitting? So you're supposed to get a permit, but contractors do not always do that. Okay, so next step is to install a heat pump hot water heater. So remember now, heat pumps move heat from one place to another. So if you have a heat pump water heater, here's your water heater, okay? So with your normal water heater, it just heats up the water. This is a canister, right? Pretend it's a canister. It just heats up the water, right? So with a heat pump water heater, what it does is it moves heat from the room around the water heater into the water heater. So it's taking heat and putting it in there. Now, you actually have heat pumps in your home already. Your refrigerator is a heat pump, and it does the opposite. So it takes heat from inside the refrigerator and pushes it out into the kitchen. The slide says 3 to 4 times more efficient than a traditional water heater. And I mean, you're getting like way more than that.
700 to 1,000% more. These things are starships. This is like free hot water.
Yeah, I mean,
my family, I got a teenager at home. We use the equivalent of like 1.6. You got it right? 1.6 therms a month. Average family is burning anywhere from 6 to 10 to 20.
Does it matter? My question and maybe this is too narrow because it's our particular situation, but we have to open up a window in the utility room into a conditioned space in order to have enough air.
Great.
But then the conditioned space is just on a different heat pump. We have electric heat pumps already. But it's in a different room, and it's all in the basement, so there's not actually a heat pump in the bathroom. So is our bathroom then gonna get really cold?
Yeah, this is why we exist too. So we have lots of great ideas. So how many square feet is your house? What's total square footage?
I guess we should take it offline because I don't know that off the top of my head.
1,000? 2,000?
Is it an
tiny?
average
Do you have a
home
tiny
or
house?
big or
You have a
small?
big
It's
house.
more than 1,000.
It's more than 1,000.
Okay.
Probably less than
Because the average Colorado house is 2,083 square feet. That's like 16,000 cubic feet. This tank is asking for 800 cubic feet. It's only asking for a tiny amount of your home's total volume. Now, if it is in a little utility room or a tight space, it will chill down that local area. But we have all kinds of great ideas to, you can send that cold air somewhere else. You can put a duct on the exhaust side of that. And for example, my ream sits in a very small utility room. It would really chill it down. But we blow the cold air into the upper floor. We can just use a floor duct or a grill or something. And sending the cold air to the upper floor where there's more heat, more movement, more thermal energy. Nobody even notices it. So the answer is send the cold air somewhere else if it's bothersome in that immediate place.
Well, in the summer it's an air conditioner.
Summer is free air conditioner. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's, and to answer your question, it's about 3,000 to 4,000 BTUs worth of cooling. So if you have like a 3-ton heating your house, putting out anywhere from 20 to 30,000 BTUs per hour. Again, it's just a tiny. You don't even have to really correct for it. It's a tiny slice of it.
Okay.
And the flow rate through that is about maybe 50 CFM. It's like half of a cheap bathroom fan. Very low flow rate. It's not like it's blowing massive amounts of cold air out. So it's easy to. We have all kinds of ideas to ameliorate or
Sign
send
up on
cold.
their website.
The Europeans are smart. They have this thing where they take the cold air and they pipe it into a pantry, and so
They can
the
do
food
that.
in there is nice and
Yeah,
cold.
like a root cellar. Chill out a root cellar with it. All kinds of great ideas.
So you want to replace this water heaters last about 10 years. So and I want to say with the heat pump as well. So furnaces will last 15 years. The best thing to do really, what you don't want to do, especially with a heat pump, is you don't want to be in the middle of December and suddenly your furnace breaks, because you're going to have a hard time. It takes a while to get the heat pump, you have to get it and then installing it and things like that. So you don't want to be in a situation where your furnace breaks and then you say, well, gosh, I can't, my pipes will freeze. I just have to get a new furnace. So the best thing to do is to kind of keep an eye on your equipment and update it to some of these sustainable electric versions. So because heat pump hot water heaters are so efficient, you can save a lot of money. Because basically, your hot water bill is going to be, basically almost nothing, a lot less anyway. And in the summer, as you said, you're getting some air conditioning too. They're also, so you'll save like $100 to $300 annually. There are incentives and stuff. I think Excel has one too. So there's federal ones, state ones, utility, etc. Now, most of them are 240. So basically, you have to have the ability to have a 240. We do, like I said, know ways. If you think you want a panel upgrade, we know of ways to get around that. So sign up for something. Sign up for our consultation. But there are actually 120 versions there. They obviously don't heat as much water, but that's sort of another option there. Now, a few downsides. So first, space. Like I think Stuart was kind of saying. So you don't want to stick this into a utility closet with no way for air to get in and out, because it needs to feed on the air around it. So you can vent it somewhere. You can have louvered doors, etc. But that's a consideration there. They do tend to be a little noisy. Some I think more than others. Mine is really noisy, but there's some that are like nothing.
It's super quiet.
Yeah. Another thing is that recovery time is longer, about twice as long, I think. Recovery time basically is everyone in your family wants to take a shower at the same time, and so now you've used up all your hot water. How long is it going to take to get hot water again? So it does take about twice as long. They do tend to have different settings though. So if let's say you have guests over, so you're going to be needing a lot of hot water, you can set it so that so I talked about these as being heat pumps, but they're actually called hybrids. And the hybrid part is heat pump plus resistive heating. So they actually have heating coils in there. Now they don't usually use them because that's going to be more expensive because you're not getting the heat pump efficiency there. But that will kick in if you have guests. Okay, so other projects you can do. So induction stoves. Induction stoves are great. They don't save a huge amount as far as carbon emissions because you don't use your stove that much, but they're very good for health. Solar panels, LED lighting, electric lawnmowers, and other equipment. So that they cause a huge amount of pollution if you use the gas variety, and electric outdoor grills. Okay, so I won't go through this, but there are a lot of. I mean, you can kind of look at it, but there are a lot of savings from the IRA and others as well. And we will guide. We don't necessarily talk you completely through incentives, but we will give you resources where you can go and there's a organization called Rewiring America, and they have a wizard where you just put in your information and it will just spit out all your incentives. And we will show you that as well. There it is. Okay. Oh yeah, we have a link to that on our website as well. Let me talk about EVs a little bit. So EVs, talk a little bit about environmental impacts. So they are a half to a tenth of carbon emissions. Now, why is there a range there? Well, it depends on what kind of electricity you're using. So if you're in Washington State, then it's 1/10 because it's almost entirely renewable because they have a lot of hydro. Here, it was a half. It's better now though because we've gotten rid of a fair amount of coal. Batteries. I'm just talking about myths that people have. Well, the battery is going to be thrown in the landfill. They are quite a bit more than 95% recyclable. So basically, if you're worried about mining and this and that, we only have to make the first generation of batteries, and then they'll just be recycled forever. And unlike, paper, for example, which if you recycle it, you can only recycle it a certain number of times, and then the fibers are too small and it just doesn't work anymore. Batteries are the opposite. So when you recycle a battery, the materials you get out of it are better than if you go out and mine them. So they can basically last forever. So safety, let me talk about, people don't know this about EVs, so they tend to be safer than gas versions. So there was a study that IAHS did, Insurance Institute of Highway Safety. So they looked at the vehicles that had basically a gas version and an EV version, and they found lower claims on insurance claims on the electric version. And they also, when they did have claims, there was less personal injury. So, so they're actually safer. Why are they safer? Well, lots of reasons. So first of all, in the front of a gas car, you've got a big engine. In the front of an EV, you've got nothing. So that's like perfect crumple zone. You don't have to get all that mechanical metal out of the way. In the back, same thing because there's no fuel tank. In the bottom is the battery that weighs 800 pounds or so. So you've got a low center of gravity. You've also got a center of gravity that's sort of in the middle as you go from the ends as well. So you aren't going to spin out as much. It's almost impossible to have one roll over because they're like the Weebles wobble and they won't fall over. Teslas are the safest cars ever tested in crash tests here in Europe and in Australia. And despite what people say, They're actually, EVs are much less likely to catch on fires, depending on your definition, 10 to 80% less. The lower figure, I think, includes fires that happened externally and just, like the house caught on fire and then the car caught on fire because it was in the house. So there are lots of incentives. If you want an EV, get one now because the Colorado incentive is going to go from $5,000 to $3,500 on January 1st. But there are other incentives too that you should look at. Excel had some; they just ran out. Hopefully, they'll do it again next year. Federal incentive, of course, which will not be immediately removed. Unless Trump does something, I don't want to get into politics, but unless Trump does something really sneaky, because it's a bill, so it has to go through Congress in order to get removed. So don't worry that it's going to suddenly change. So electricity costs for an EV is like $30 to $50 a month if you charge at home, and a lot less maintenance. And they've been around long enough to really have real life figures on this, but they'll probably last 2 to 5 times as long.
Yeah, early Tesla batteries had lasted as long as 750,000 miles, like first generation Tesla batteries.
Okay, leasing an electric vehicle is very cheap right now. Go and look at the Leaf you can get for $99 a month.
Get it for less. The Boulder Nissan dealer.
Yeah.
They still do that at one
Is
point.
it still like that $19? Is
There's
it still
something
doing
I
that?
crazy.
just talked to someone this morning, she put $3,000 down, and she pays $5 a month.
There you go.
It's insane. It's
You're crazy
insane.
not to do that.
It's insane, yeah.
Is driving also a brand new one for like something like
Yeah,
that.
you need to spend hundreds of dollars a month on gas.
The Ioniq 5 was like less than $200 a month, and it's very good. For a traditional automaker, it's extremely good.
Things like this. You need to pay something down. But then, yeah, she's paying less than $20 a month.
I'm gonna skip in there. Plug-in hybrids. So a lot of people say, well, what about a plug-in hybrid? Plug-in hybrid kind of, I think, to a lot of people seems like kind of a safe option. An EV seems a little bit too scary because it's too new. It's sort of like, anyway. Now, plug-in hybrids on paper seem like a good idea. However, as far as carbon emissions, there was a real-life study finding that they were actually worse in carbon emissions than gas cars. Now, how can that be? 2 things that they found. One is that people didn't plug them in. So they thought they would, or maybe they just wanted it for the incentive and they had no intention of plugging it in, but they just ran it like a gas car. The second thing that happened is that some of them had this thing where if you were on the battery and you put your foot, you really want it to suddenly go kind of fast, and you put your foot down, they would kick in the gas engine. And that's a very inefficient way of using the gas engine to keep on turning it on and off. So the upshot was that they actually were worse. Now, I think if you probably got one that had a big battery, a fairly big battery, and you didn't drive it like you stole it, you might be okay. But just keep that in mind that they aren't necessarily better. There are incentives. They'll last, a plug-in hybrid, now you would think they wouldn't last as long as a gas car because they basically have 2 systems, so it's sort of like twice as much stuff to break. But the electric part saves the gas part from work. I mean, that's the the thing that's going to break, and since you're using the electric part some of the time, you're sort of saving the gas part of it. So they actually do last longer than gas cars. Okay, well, that's it. So I'm going to just you can ask as many questions as you want of Stuart. He knows everything. So.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about solar. We recently got our solar online, and I put in the information for like the time of use billing, but then it occurred to me that there's no way that Excel buys energy at the same rate that they sell energy.
Right.
So, how do you know the buy rates, or where do I find them?
They're buying it, but they're buying it from you at, it might be like 10 cents a kilowatt hour or less. How big is your system?
We got 21 panels.
8,000, like 8,200, 8,200 they're 400 panels,
I think so.
420s. Yeah, so you got like an 8,000 kilowatt hour system. This time of year, unless you have optimum orientation, you're not making much power right now.
Right now, we're making on a good day like 15.
Kilowatt hours? It's not bad. It's way better than I did. Yeah. Yeah, but your Excel is going to buy that. It might be even 6 cents kilowatt hour. I'm not sure. So this is why. Now, did you say you had a heat pump?
We do, yeah. But I should talk to you about that offline.
Okay. Well, yeah, because when we start talking, when we consult with you first, we put solar on the back burner. That's the last thing we talk, because that's not really electrifying your house. As long as you have a furnace in your house and a heat pump,
Our only, the water heater is the only remaining outpost.
Right, and interestingly, kind of contrary to what was said, heat pump hot water heater is often the first thing we encourage people to go to, because it doesn't require weatherizing your house. You can still have a lousy envelope in your house, still have a gas furnace. My most recent console, gas furnaces were only 10 years old, condensing furnaces, so high efficiency. This hot water tank's 10 years old. I'm like, get rid of that right now. Don't wait for it to start leaking. And as you can see, they're so efficient. I can show you my phone, but we're halfway through the month, and I've used 23 kilowatt hours. So a therm is 29.3 kilowatt hours. So I'm like at 0.8 therms of gas use, and I'm halfway through the month. So again, free hot water. So that's a thing. When I do my consults, the hot water tank is like a first go-to. You get your foot in the door with electrification in a major way. It's easy to do. It's an easy install. These, contrary to what an install would tell you, a heat pump hot water tank installs exactly like a conventional water tank. It plumbs in the same way. Just has a condensate line on it. It's the only difference. Of course, it gives off cold air. But it goes in the same way, and immediately you've taken 20% of your gas burn offline. So that's what electrification is all about. We usually start talking about solar after you've fully electrified your house and maybe gotten an EV or two, because now you can use, instead of giving that power to Excel at a discount, you're going to use all of that and then some. So it's,
So you think it's better to, like, because we also have a battery, and there's options.
You have a storage battery.
Yeah.
Powerwall?
Uh-huh.
Okay, one of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's options for how to tell the system what to do. So you think it's better
Right.
to tell it, like, use as much as possible in the home?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would. And also it's a time of use too, kind of game you could play with that.
Well, so right. So those are kind of the two options. It's like, do the time of use thing and try to maximize, your cell back, or
Right,
use as much as possible in the home.
right. Yeah, I'd use as much as possible in the home, because otherwise the home is using Excel's power, which ranges all the way up to, 29 cents a kilowatt hour, 26
Not
a
in the
peak.
winter, but
It's pretty high. It's over 20 cents a kilowatt hour, right?
in the winter,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I thought
From
it's
3 to
13.
7.
I thought it's 13 in the winter.
I think that's their interim rate. That's their low rate. The low rate is 10 to 13. I think that's like the overnight rate. It's higher than you think, I think. I don't pay any attention yes, ma'am. Because I have community solar. I'm a big believer in that. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, I want to say something about solar. Well, community solar is great, and you can just go to Excel and sign up for their program, and I
Well, you do it through SunShare, yeah.
Yeah.
You do it through SunShare.
But anyway, yeah, SunShare's good.
Yeah.
But anyway, solar. So if you have an EV, the best time to, if you're concerned about carbon emissions, the best time to charge, especially in like late spring, is during the day. So time of use will push you to do it at night. But the thing is that at night you're using coal, natural gas, etc. So you're using the dirtiest energy. Whereas in the day you're using a lot more renewables. And if you have solar, that's great because you can kind of trickle charge and take that. But if you charge during the day, you're doing two things. First of all, you're using cleaner energy, but then secondly, you're basically telling Excel and the powers that be, the PUC and stuff like that people are using energy during the day, so we need to put in more solar. If you don't, then what Excel will do sometimes is to curtail their energy because they'll have too much energy if people have a lot of solar, they'll curtail it, and unfortunately the easiest thing to curtail is solar. So they won't curtail the nasty stuff, they'll curtail the solar. So if you're concerned about climate change, you want to do exactly the opposite of what Excel wants you to do, which is use more energy during the day. It'll be more expensive, but just saying what the trade-off kind of is.
Yeah, the battery thing is interesting. We just show you another way of doing things. We have a backup battery bank as well, but it's a lead acid AGM, and its job. Our philosophy is we like running off the grid, as long as we have community solar. So all my energy is generated either off my rooftop or a solar array out east somewhere. In fact, I'm running a surplus with Excel right now. Excel is giving me credit because I have a little bit of excess solar production coming off of that solar farm. So we try to do everything during the day. We charge all our cars during the day. And anyway, our battery bank, the way we look at our battery bank is to pick up the house load with a power loss relatively temporarily. It'll run the house maybe for a couple of days. But if we're going to be in an extended power outage, we turn to our cars. That's what EVs are for. And we're going to have vehicle to grid here someday. But in the meantime, one of the many things Go Electric Colorado can tell you to do is how to tap into your EV. Because the battery in the average long-range EV, my Model 3 and my Chevy Bolt's like 5 Tesla Powerwalls. My Model 3 is almost 7 Tesla Powerwalls. And it's transportation at the same time. Far more efficient to tap into that car. My Chevy Bolt can run my refrigerator for 6 weeks straight without being charged. So that's our philosophy, is the AGM battery bank picks up the load on the house so fast the LED lights don't even blink, keeps the lights running, keeps a baseline power suite in the house going, just light appliances. But if you want to play that kind of game, if you want to say run your house off of power walls, you need a whole bunch of power walls in your house, because your heat pump on a cold day, my Panasonic EcoNav, that can burn 40 kilowatt hours in a day, just when it's down to zero. And an EV fill-up is like, average long-range EV fill-up is about 50 kilowatt hours. So it's interesting. It's kind of like, the term, it takes money to make money. It takes heavy power to save a lot of power. So, that's a lot of power that you're putting into EVs. It's a lot of power that's going into your heat pump in the course of a day, even though it's a third less than the gas furnace. If you convert it back into therms, you're burning 3 times the energy with your old gas furnace. It's still a lot of electricity relative to what you're used to. So to ask a Powerwall to pick all of that up, it's kind of a lot. Like a 13 kilowatt hours, 13.1 is, I think that's what your Powerwall is rated to. That's really good for running your heat pump on a mild day. It might just keep a heat pump running on a really mild day without running anything else. Or just keeping the lights and computers and things running for several days. That's really what 13 kilowatt hours is good for. So, but yeah, you could run off of it. You could cycle off of it, but it's not. You're not going to run your heat pump for very long on it. You're certainly not going to charge your car. Your car will suck that dry like that. So, that 24 kilowatt hour Fiat you have. So I'm just, that's why there's different ways of looking at it. If you really want your battery bank to pick up your entire house, including running your heat pump, that's probably for the average household, that's at least 4 Tesla Powerwalls. And rather than spend all that money on that, just figure out how to pull energy out of your car instead. Or have an alternate heat source. We're really big on that, like an alternate thermal backup in your house. High efficiency wood stove, wood pellet stove, even a propane stove.
Yeah, we have a wood stove.
Yeah, wood stoves, that's what we use too. We have a high efficiency, low emissions wood stove. We only ran it like 4 days last year. Because that thing's only rated to -5. But all the heat pumps we're going to sell you, the heat pumps that we're going to talk you into will work down to -25. So that's what Julia was touching on too. There's great equipment out there. The legacy HVAC industry hasn't embraced it yet, but all the installers will recommend to you will give you a correct piece of equipment you probably will not need backup heat. Even on the coldest days, you won't need backup heat. So I can just keep running on. Are there other? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I really could have used you guys like a year and a half ago. I just electrified like my whole home. I worked with the general contractors. We were doing other work, and I don't know if he did the right stuff. I don't know who he was using, and it's just like,
Do you have a heat pump then?
Yeah, we've got a heat pump.
What kind do you have?
An LG.
Oh boy. Yeah. Does it have dual fuel? Does it have gas backup, or does it?
No.
Oh, so, well, how's it doing then?
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it seems like it's working
Okay.
well, but it's kind of this like, I don't know, like all
Okay.
said and done, I don't trust our contractor after the whole project.
Well, it sounds like you did you right. If you've been running it a couple of seasons now.
This is our second winter.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I don't know, I'm just kind of feeling like, I mean, do you guys ever come out and see like what someone's got to say like, yeah.
We do that all the time.
You do?
Yeah, the Marshall Fire, we've been involved in the Marshall Fire rebuild effort. And the Marshall Fire is just a great study in doing things wrong, doing things right. There's that's a huge effort that we got in on about a year or two late. And so there's great installs out there. And then there's a lot of installs with warm weather heat pumps. We've got one gentleman now, he's fighting with the GC to get, because he won't have any heat this winter unless he gets a real heat pump in there.
Yeah.
And everything in between.
Yeah, we've got a cold.
So it sounds like you did okay.
Yeah, I think we did.
Oh, we take a look at your equipment. You can spec it. We just looked at the specs. You go to the NEAP website. There's a number of websites, and you can just look at the the data on it and see how it performs.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you've got it in your house, so it's working.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I just wish I had more contact with the people who installed it, knew really who they were. It was like a subcontractor. So
well, the thing for you to do you know how much energy you're saving? Have you compared that to your previous life on your gas furnace? That's really the thing you want to be doing.
We never lived in the house before.
Okay.
We lost our home in the Marshall Fire, but then we ended up relocating and redoing this big remodel where we electrified everything. We got rid of gas altogether.
Right.
We have a heat pump water heater that seems to be working well.
Fabulous.
And I think I'm mostly happy. But
if you want to know how you're doing, then one thing we recommend to everyone is get a power app, power monitoring app, an amp meter. And we always recommend Emporia. Almost everybody on the team has it. And the nice thing is they're a local company. They're right over here, I think, in Littleton. So when you call their engineers, I want to show you something. You're talking to people right down the street. You can order their stuff on Amazon. It is the best $140 you'll ever spend, and you can wire up I think originally you get 8 amp meters, so you can wire up your panel. It's a DIY thing. You might want to have an electrician do it too, because you have to touch the hot leads. I'm going to show you something here.
I built my own.
And you really want to get this when you electrify, because for all you know, you don't know how, otherwise you don't know how you're doing.
Yeah.
You have no idea.
And is your LG have the Think app? Are you on a Wi-Fi? Because I just put one in and it tells me what instantaneous usage is.
So
That's
here,
pretty cool.
if you just pass it, so this is so we're halfway through the month. I just scroll. So this is what Emporia gives. It is amazing. So this is my heat pump hot water here on the month. So this is halfway through the month. And you look in the upper right there, 25.6 kilowatt hours. That's something less than 29.3. So that's like 0.8 therms of gas. So 0.8 of a therm of gas for a whole half a month's a hot half water. It says maybe your tank is doing that, but you don't know unless you, because maybe your tank is using the resistance coils. And this is how you get away with the 120 volt models, because 99.9% of the tank, my tank is running in heat pump mode only. It's about 300 to 350 watts. Back in my day, that was 3 light bulbs. Now, if it needs to catch up, it'll fire up one or both of the resistance coils. That's 2,500 to 3,000 watts. But you don't know for how long often it's doing that until you get that. And and there's my whole house. You can see everything's on there. My heat pump, especially my heat pump and my EV charger. So I know the watt, how much power I put in my car every month, how much fuel.
And so that it's because it goes, you can see for each like circuit.
Yeah, you can push it. Yeah, like how much did my EV use though? And let's go.
And then solar didn't tell you about it.
There you go. That's how much fuel I've used. 241 kilowatt hours. So mine's about right. We use 250 to 300 kilowatt hours.
And so the electrician puts each circuit in there.
Especially with the
The ones that you want to
Yeah.
monitor. Like, don't bother with your
we
electric
have
stove. Your electric stove is 1%
kids'
of your
rooms
power.
upstairs, but then we
You
have
know, bother, you know,
Is
monitor-
this available like for commercial buildings too?
It's also good to
Probably. Yeah, you can do multiple panels.
Is
Yeah,
it
talk
like
about it.
if a
Talk about it.
recommendation is to sub-meter so that you understand where your power use is, this is doing even better.
Yeah, way better. And the latest software upgrade is this. Let me show you. This is so super cool. So back, prior software iteration, you had to look at the vertical axis. Now look, you just touch the bar. Isn't that beautiful? Do that. I'm sorry, we just get excited about stuff like that. So that's like the latest software upgrade, and then you can read off the amount and do your math.
But you're pointing out an interesting problem. Historically, we electrified our homes and we heated our homes and we did it as cheaply as possible because energy was free, we thought, and pollution was definitely free.
That's
So we
exactly
had no interest in monitoring this stuff. It just
Right.
does it work, does it not?
right.
Now we have a new responsibility, and not everybody likes bar graphs in their pocket about but some people do. So how would Joe and Jane homeowner have someone help them on an ongoing basis monitor their consumption?
Well, that's where we come in.
Well, I mean, it's a one-time thing, but it'd be interesting that there's a service that says, subscribe to this, and we will watch your house. We'll put in all the current loop thingies, and we'll tell you how things are going and where you work. Because I have the Nest thermostat. We have the Nest thermostat.
Right.
It tells you whether you work, how you are relative to the neighborhood. That's kind of like a guilt trip thing. You're using a lot of energy, Bonnie Shalom.
Right. You want to know.
Yeah, you want to know, but it's too much though. I think
You're
for
right.
the average person, they
You're
just like there's no hot water. Call the plumber, and he'll put in what he has in the truck.
Right. So
Right.
So most consults we don't get anywhere near talking about this.
Yeah.
And a couple of consults back, the guy couldn't even find his circuit breaker panel. Didn't even know where that was. So we get that, and then I had a gentleman not too long ago had done everything, and we got right into his energy recovery ventilator because he had a low air change rate. I had an airtight house, and that's a really big deal. All the Marshall homes got them because they're built to a tighter code. Most of them do. And that's a piece of equipment that we would like to see you getting in your house because that's telling us that you've done enough air sealing and insulation. Get down to a low enough air change rate where you want to, because a lot of what we do is built for the future. Talk about how to tap into an EV for an extended power outage. We can talk fire mitigation and also how to keep the air inside your house clean. I mean, here in the summertime, it's ozone alert every day. It's really terrible air. One of the most polluted cities in the country. That's just going to get worse. These forests behind us are going to burn for the next 1,000 years. Everything, from 9,000 feet down is going to be grass and brush in a few decades. So degraded air quality is a big deal. So how can you make your house airtight and keep the air inside clean? And that's a heat recovery ventilation system. And we're experts on
I'm
that.
only 9 micrograms per cubic meter right now.
Yeah.
But if I get a spike, usually because my wife burns something. Oh, I didn't say that.
Yeah, there we go.
So air quality. is
So
probably
anyway,
bad.
so we don't get this. This is kind of like a finishing touch, and the homeowner doesn't necessarily have to be geeked out or have it on the phone. It's something that we can go back and look at from time to time for you. We'll look at it for you and see how your compressor is doing. Like to see if your LG is short cycling. Like how big is your house? How many square feet?
It's 2,000.
Okay, and how big is your LGs? 2 tons, 3
This
tons?
is crazy.
See, I'd like to know that.
Yeah.
I would like to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's a big deal with heat pumps. As we were talking about, you want it. It's really important to match the size of the heat pump to the envelope of the house.
I feel like, I mean, when we had our heat pumps installed, like
Well.
210, 310, like that was not the language that was.
What were you
used.
talking?
Like 12, 24.
Okay, a ton is 12,000 BTUs. So he was just speaking in BTUs. Like he was saying 12,000 or 24,000. A ton is just easier to say. A ton is 12,000 BTUs. Most manufacturers offer whole ton and then half ton, like 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, depending on the manufacturer. Unit size units. And so, what type of heat pump do you have?
We have the species.
Oh, you have the hyper heat.
Yeah.
It's rated to minus 13.
Yeah.
And it'll work to minus 25 or colder.
Yeah, but I still feel like, I mean, I know that our house is not as well so as it could be.
But you can always continue on that.
Yeah.
You can make that better.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah, that's.
And how long have you had your hyper heat?
We got it. I think this is probably our 4th season.
Well, that's really substantial because the winter 22-23 was the 16th coldest on record. That was a great data. It's a data point we asked from everybody.
Well, and
Ours did
we
okay.
have.
We did, ours did okay too.
Yeah, like if your systems were doing okay that winter,
Well, and we
You're
have
great.
backup. Like on the really cold,
you have electric resistance.
we have a wood stove.
Oh, you have wood stuff. Okay, you didn't. Okay,
So I'm sure we burned some wood that winter. And like last year during that dip, we just, well, actually I wasn't there, but my husband burnt the wood stove like, during that cold snap.
right. That's interesting. So your house is an older house, leaky, or has
It's
not
a-
improved down below? Because the HS2 guys, they're all the other ones we know. Nobody ever used backup heat on them.
It's a trailer,
Oh, I got you. Okay.
so it's 2x4 construction.
Oh, you're doing well then.
And I mean, we like stripped it down and rebuilt it.
Yeah.
So,
No, you're doing great. So most of the time, you just run in the fireplace now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my Panasonic, it's rated to -5, but I give it the day off when it hits +5. It doesn't really do that well. I just shut it off and fire up the wood stove. That's what I do too. But that was off the back of a truck.
but
It was
yeah,
a
but
great
I feel
deal.
like we're not like, I don't know, I just feel like we're not quite using it right.
How many times? Okay, I already asked you square feet. And you're not sure, but how
No,
many?
I know.
How big is the heat pump? 24,000 BTU.
So we have 5 splits.
Oh, you have a mini split system.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
So we have 2 in our main living area. That's probably like 750 square feet.
Uh huh.
And then, and I think it's 2 12s. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Those are big.
And then,
Those are really big. They can put out 15,000 BTUs, the 12s.
and then they put. I don't actually know what size they are, but then we have like 3 small bedrooms
Okay.
with like each one has.
It's possible. I don't know how well size it was. It's possible if you try to run all the heads, you'll overtax. You'll far exceed the compressor. Most installers will install like 20% more capacity, but beyond that, the compressor really won't. It'll probably it might just give you cold air out of all of the units. So you might want to try just not running, like just run the ones out in that main room really high and just leave the bedroom doors open, things like
Is it
that.
all one compressor?
Yeah, it's all in one compressor.
I have
One.
I have 2 different compressors.
I should.
You have one inverter outside. You know it's the big box
I
outside.
know, but do they stack 2 or is there just one? It was kind of.
Well, your unit, yeah. Well, they can have 2
Well, they have
fans.
the branch box. I don't know if that-
Yeah. You have the refrigerant line comes in. There's a branch box, and then that goes off to the different heads.
Yeah, I mean, we don't run them really at the same time because we use basically the main room during the day,
Right.
and we just have the bedroom one on from like 5 to 8 a.m.
Right.
and then turn it off.
Right. So the Emporia Power App would help you with that as well because you can study it. You can study the compressor because everything is about what's going on in the compressor outside.
Yeah, and like what you were saying about, are you letting it run its full cycle? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like with 5 heads, you probably you probably easily have the capability to command more than the compressor can supply. Remember, at our altitude, there's a 17% degradation, for elevation. So that's a pretty big hit. So so you can probably ask for more than the compressor can give. And then another thing with short cycling, if you have a short cycling issue like those units in your more open area, that 750 square feet area, you may want to run those heads hotter, like at a higher temperature than you would normally expect. Get that room a little hotter, and then that'll drive more heat into the other bedrooms. And then if those units are running hotter, that'll be a more stable power curve. It'd be more stable power curve. You'll keep the refrigeration cycle more stable that way. If you turn the temperature down, one thing it's easy to do, especially with a mini split system, which I'm drag this thing out now, is if you command, like a lot of us are used to 67, 68, a cool indoor air temperature, so am I, that's healthier. But that can put you into a short cycling, you're just not commanding enough, especially if this unit is large for the room that it's in. If this unit is large for the room that it's in, running the room at a little higher temperature can help. You're not going to necessarily use that much more energy. In fact, you may use less because you'll have a stable power curve instead of these big spikes that are ramping up power consumption.
And so we've been turning the system off at night.
Negative. Now, you want to keep running all the time because they're smart enough. If they're sized properly, they're supposed to be. First of all, I do a lot of magic. Like this watch is and the hyperheat's got to be at least as good. This is Panasonic, so this watches the room. This is tuned to the human infrared signature. It can see up 23 feet. Knows when you're not in the room. It can modulate the temperature up and down about 3 degrees, and that's important because the most setback you want with these is 3 to 4 degrees, no more. It's not like back in the day where you shut the heat off at night and then turn them back on in the morning. Yeah, that really ramps up your power, puts too much of a demand. Remember, these are slow and steady units. They run at a really low power consumption. So they're best used, they're best when they're run continuously. Now, these warm days that we have where it's up in the mid 50s and touches on 60, that's really hard for these things. There's not enough differential on the compressor and the indoor temperature. So that's when you can fall into short cycling too. So to address that, like it sounds counterintuitive, but if it's like 55 outside, you want to keep this running. You might want to command like 72 Fahrenheit on something a little warmer, or just shut it off and turn on a really small space. We actually run a space heater in the basement sometimes when it's 60 degrees outside in the wintertime, rather than commanding these.
So one of the problems
Okay.
of if you have a gas system, what a lot of people do is they'll just turn it down at night. Because they don't really need it. They've got the blankets and stuff like that, and it saves energy and all that. Now the problem with doing that with a heat pump system is that when, let's say you turn it, it's 70 during the day, and then you turn it down to 65 at night or something like that. The problem is that when it turns on again, let's say you turn it on again at 6 in the morning. Well, 6 in the morning is when it's coldest outside. So that's when it's the least efficient. There's the least amount of heat that it can grab and bring in. So that's why you're going to end up paying actually more and not doing anything as far as doing sort of the opposite as far as carbon.
I mean, based on our electricity bills, like we're using less energy turning them off at night because we started. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. We were running them continuously, and our electricity bills were like in the 300s every month, and then we cut them down pretty significantly by turning them off at night. But it sounds like that's not great for the system.
Well, it depends. If the system, bringing up a really good point. If your system's oversized, then if it's oversized, then shutting them off at night or giving them a deep setback might actually work in your favor. It's not how they're supposed to work. They're supposed to run constantly because a lot of what's going on in your house is all the material, like all in this room right here, the chairs, the books, everything is thermal mass. And if that's at a stable temperature, that helps modulate the temperature inside the room. So if your units are oversized, then they're going to play that catch up better and more efficiently than a properly sized unit. That's why I like to get it for your power out, because then we can watch what your system is doing. But if that's working for you, do it. That doesn't hurt it. It doesn't hurt the machine to shut it off at night at all. That's fine. You just don't want it going. You just don't want it going up and down when it's in the run mode. You don't want it short cycling when it's running. But the typical advice for these things is to keep them running all the time. And they're smart enough to modulate all the way back. Mine can go all the way back to 186 watts. That's barely 2 light bulbs back in the day. So at its minimum, it can modulate back to less than 200 watts. And you'll see that when it's warm outside. If it gets too warm outside, you'll see that even this system will fall into short cycling. Another thing too, I know the Mitsubishi, these have a lot of automated modes, where again, they watch the room, they know if you're in and out of the room. It's generally recommended most often not to use those. Just use it in the regular standard heat pump mode, where it's modulating at that temperature for a number of reasons. Just again, to keep a stable indoor air temperature. But yeah, there's a lot of science to this. I just want to show you a couple of things. Make sure you're cleaning these. So if you're in the heat pumps, make sure you're in the world of small filters. That's every 2 weeks. You want to take a look at that. It's not like the big one in the basement. We've gone into homes where this is just like a hair mat, and God knows how the machine was. This is every 2 weeks. You want to.
Every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
How do you clean that?
You just take it out, right?
Yeah. Now 3 months is the big central air handler. If you have a forced air system, that's 3 months. That's the big air filter. These little guys are protective. They're not. This isn't keeping you from breathing bad air, but this is protecting the coil inside. And you wash them with water and then gently towel them off. Don't vacuum them because this is really diaphanous. You can damage it very easily.
Can you put it back in while it's still damp?
No, just fold the towel over it.
Yeah.
Gently press it, dries it like that. And don't dry them out in the sun because UV will destroy this real fast. There's no UV stabilizer in this. It's a really fine mesh. The instructions will tell you that too. They say don't use a brush attachment in a vacuum. So just wash it under the thing. So I just wanted to show you that. But yeah, this has a couple of modes. Comfort and EcoNav 1. They're really sophisticated. They know when you're not in the room and all of that. But our big heads are down in the basement where we drive the basement to a higher temperature. We'll run the basement at like 74 degrees because we have a big open stairwell and it convects up. So one head down in the basement heats all of our house most of the time. We could fire up the other 3 or 4 heads if we need be. But if we had EcoNav, that would just fluctuate too much. So the downstairs head is locked in just normal heat pump mode. And inverter technology, one of the miracles of inverter technology is it modulates to 1 degree. All your heat pumps are doing that. That's so you should have much greater comfort in the house. And that's why we tell you to keep it on, so you enjoy that state, you're not getting hot and cold. But if you've got a big, powerful system, if it's running, if it's giving you a lower energy bill, and if it's recovering, if it's warming the house up fast enough in the morning and you fire it back up, keep doing that. That's fine. But that speaks to an oversized system. So if I were you, I would get a power monitor there, and I'd be exceptionally careful if it's running during the day and it's getting up to like 55, 60 degrees at night. The compressor might just be slamming on and off. And especially in the summertime with air conditioning, because air conditioning, it's really easy to short cycle in air conditioning mode with these because they work a lot less hard. These things are sized and tuned for heating in our climate, and air conditioning is almost like an afterthought. So
it feels like the opposite. Like it feels like it works great for air conditioning.
yes, it should, right? But it's easy to short cycle with air conditioning, I'm just saying. So with your system, it sounds like you have a very powerful system because it's recovering your home's heat in the morning. Mine would struggle to do that. Mine's tuned to the size of the house, so we just keep ours running 24 hours a day.
How do we get in touch with you?
Other questions? We've got so much to talk about. I could just stand here. So our consults are scheduled for an hour. I always go to an hour and a half at least. Because there's just so much to talk about.
Yeah, just go to our website, which is on there, and then there's something that says schedule a consultation.
What was your name?
Yep, I'm Stu Cummings, and we talk to each other. Us coaches talk to each other. So, for example, if we had a sizing issue, you're getting sized for a heat pump, and the contractor comes back with a set of numbers. Even your existing systems, if you want, we can take a look at it. Because there's always all these tricks you can do. If you know too big of a system, here's our poster child. I won't say her name, but she actually contacted me the other day with an ERV question. We have a house. It was the first Marshall Fire rebuild. We walk into, it's 2,200 square, okay, at least 80s. We walk into our house, remember it was like 2,500 square feet. She has 7 tons worth of heat pump. That's over twice what, so we're like, okay, you could disconnect one and run it over to the neighbor's house and split your electric bill. You know, really, it was like that bad. So we're dealing with that house on like, what does she do with over twice the heating capacity in the house? Telling her things like just shut one system off, obviously. You know, in the summer, shut the bottom downstairs off. In the winter, just shut the upstairs off. You know, tricks like that. But inside of a home, we can exercise that same type of philosophy to make your operation a little bit more efficient. It sounds like, I'd like to see your system because it sounds like maybe oversized a little, but if you can shut it off at night and recover the heat quickly in the morning, be comfortable, and have an electric bill that's lower, that's great. That's fine. The system doesn't care about that. That's just fine. Yeah.
We'll reach out.
Yeah.
Is this oversizing problem all over the place, or the contractor just
Yeah.
saying I might as well
The
put it
problem
in?
is the traditional manual J doesn't account for the typical load calculation. It can miss things. It's hard. It typically oversizes, and also a contractor will often see numbers and just not trust them, because remember the typical HVAC community, it's like they never want to call back. They never want to hear back from you. That's like an admission of failure. They commit seppuku, you know. And then also they're coming from the world of gas, where the typical home here has an 80 to 100,000 BTU gas furnace in it. We're going to replace that 80 to 100,000 with 24 to 36,000 worth of state-of-the-art cold climate heat pump. It's really hard for them to get their heads around that.
So does the organization have any feedback to your contractors to give them guidance? Like you come in after the fact and you say, guys, you keep on oversizing.
Yeah, this is a great
this problem.
Well, what we do is we recommend to you a set of contractors that are heat pump friendly. First of all, we're not going to send you to a legacy installer. But one thing I do like to say is after you're on the phone, you're on the computer with me for an hour, I like to think of all my customers as being able to, I will tell people, go out and call a legacy contract. Go ahead and call Myers Heating and Plumbing. Have them come out to your house. Let's press the test. I was a test pilot. We like pressing buttons. So press the test. Have them come out to your house, give you an estimate, and if he opens his mouth and says they don't work in cold weather, you can say thank you for your time. Otherwise, maybe he has something intelligent to say, or you can say, no, I don't want the one that quits at 35 degrees Fahrenheit and then switches to gas. Do you sell and install rigs? Well, yeah, we actually have Mitsubishi Hyper-Heats. Oh, great, you do have those. You know, how many of you installed last month? Well, I did one a year ago. Okay, thank you for your time. You know, you should be able to have that conversation, not fear a legacy contractor, because with us, you have us in your back pocket now. We're not gonna let you get ripped off or oversized. You can always come back to your coach and say, hey, how does this sound? That's ridiculous.
So I talked with a mini split a couple of months ago, based on a recommendation of one of our own members. They used his contractor, and I was asking about a Mitsubishi, and they steered me towards an LG, and they said it's a much better, much more efficient unit, and that's what they put in. Did I make a mistake?
I don't know yet. We'd have to get the model number and go into NEEP's website, New England Energy Efficiency Program.
But
NEEP
you
is
know,
like to go to. So we'd have to just
they
compare the
presented it
numbers.
as if, oh yeah, we do both, but then when it came down to it, they really only do LG.
Right.
And so,
Yeah, a lot of contractors are brand specific. They have
Yeah.
old inventory they're trying to get rid of. That's a big
So far,
problem.
so good. I haven't really run the thing in cold weather, but,
Right.
and it's just an extra. It's dealing with a problem room. I still have my gas force.
Yeah.
So, and
So it's just a single head, single inverter. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a common.
So I have an interesting problem of the thermostat for the gas unit and the thermostat for this. You know, how do I set those so that I get more efficient?
Yeah, that's another thing I want to talk
I
about.
said
So
that-
these are really sensitive to other heat and cold system
Right.
sources in the room, because it does, even when it's in its basic heat pump mode, it is watching the room and it's directing air to the coldest part of the room. So it's another thing to think about. If you have another source of heat blowing into the room over here, you have like I do, a floor humidifier.
Right.
So my humidifier, I actually hide from this thing so it can't see that plume of, because that's cold air coming off. It's evaporative humidification.
Mine,
So-
I think, is picking up the thermostat, the temperature of the room from the remote control. So
Yeah.
it depends on where I put it. So far I got it faked out that I set this thing a degree higher than in the winter, the main unit, and the main unit says, "Oh, I'm satisfied," and it turns off, and
Right.
this one's fine.
I know, but we have like 3 different thermostats right now in our
Yeah,
big
what do you
living
do?
space. And like one's the backup or old natural gas system that still works, so that's our backup system. But that thinks that the room is at like 65, but then our other thermometer says it's 68. And then the actual thermostat for the heat pump doesn't have a thermometer on it that I can read what temperature the room is at.
Oh.
So that's confusing, because I'm like, how do I know that it's getting to the right temperature? I just put 65.
So I think
Like-
I think, you know, it used to be the old days, you had one Honeywell thermostat with a piece of mercury in it for your whole house, and God help you. Now we have all these thermostats, all these different
And
controls.
it's a remote, so
And
it's like,
so-
where do I put it in the room to get the right
Yeah,
temperature?
so we're really talking about having to have a home automation system that's trying to figure out presence detection, who's in what room, what do you want, what's your comfort level, and keeping you comfortable with the most efficient use of energy. And none of the contractors will touch that, because that's like nightmare.
Well, with the heat pump system, and even the retrofitted, the standard installs a retrofitted forced air system
Right.
with a central heat pump. That should maintain much better temperature. You know, it should modulate to
Right.
just within a degree or two.
Right.
And since it's constant, that's the whole idea of keeping them on all the time to avoid temperature swings. And with proper ductwork modification, you should have, you know, that's just some mechanical work on the ducts generally, or maybe adding another zone, or augmenting with a head. You can have a real popular option, of course, is split systems where maybe the main part of the house is on its original forced air ductwork, and then those problematic upper floor rooms that are hot in the summertime, those are prime candidates for mini split heads, and you can run all of that off of one compressor outside. But the thing I want to emphasize is anything in our world where, you know, all of our homes are built for forced air, most of them are built on forced air. The Japanese invented this, and then when Daikin is one of the big manufacturers, Japanese manufacturers. When they bought Goodman and Amana, and they came to America and they started getting American engineers on their staff. The American engineers asked the Japanese, "Can you make us forced air systems?" The Japanese were deeply offended because they couldn't understand why anyone would want to degrade the efficiency. As soon as you step out of this, you're much less efficient. The efficiency of these things are remarkable. So the Japanese couldn't understand why we would want to bastardize this fine technology by jamming it into an old forced air system. Just a little bit of historic.
It's also like, I mean, we had that.
And Japan is all mini splits, 100% mini splits in Japan.
For us, it was like, why would we still have uneven heating issues in our house if
Right.
we could go to mini splits?
Well, there are
With the
issues with
forced
these.
air.
Like if you have a house that's rambling, lots of rooms, obviously it's hard to, sticking one of these per code in every living space is really hard to do. But that's just our fault for building big rambling houses. The Japanese live in little boxes, and these things are ideal.
Because architects don't design for HVAC efficiency, they
Right.
design for aesthetics and value and
Yeah.
to your budget.
The
How
ideal
much
house is
more-
like passive house design is basically rectangle.
How
Look
much
at
more
passive house.
efficient is a geothermal system to an air source?
Yeah, it's a great question. So geothermal can see coefficients of performance of like 4.5 to almost 5.
More than
These
this?
top out at 3.5 to 4.5.
Oh, okay.
So we will advise on geothermal, but because of the cost, the disruption, geothermal, we'll recommend that to like multi-housing units or maybe commercial installs. But for the average consumer, these things are so deployable and flexible. It's just a much better deal. It's not worth the extra price, and plus these are so efficient now.
We do have, as a community, new construction coming up. And so the question is, with like how, so you said it's 4.5 versus 3. What was the?
Coefficients of performance. So what Julia touched on, for every watt, for every kilowatt that comes into this machine, it produces 3 kilowatts equivalent of heat. That's
And is
the
that
miracle
true in
of these things.
Colorado?
Yeah.
It is.
Well, until you get down to 0, but the real efficient machines like Mitsubishi Hyperheat are still
Yeah.
above 2. They'll be
Okay.
like 2.5. But
Okay.
those are transits. Our average temperatures are like, for the next 3 months, our average is like 43 high and 25 to 27 low.
Right.
At that temperature range, A Mitsubishi Hyper-Heat is like pretty much at 3, just
Great.
2.75 or something like that. Whereas the most efficient gas furnace is 0.9, right?
Right.
And a strip heater is 1.0.
Okay.
So again, three or more times more efficient.
Geothermal would be 5.
It can be. It's usually like 4.5 or so. But again, it's a lot more complex. It's just, disruption of the landscape and drilling costs.
What's the, like with
But
how,
we do
with
buy
these
them.
sometimes we need backup power. With geothermal, do you need backup power?
Sure. Well,
Sure.
yeah, it's a heat pump system like anything. Yeah.
Okay,
of course.
so it's still,
It's
but-
just using the ground as its source for heat exchange.
I know, so I guess I was just thinking that if it, like, the ground doesn't get to -15.
No, that's why the ground is like a steady 55 Fahrenheit.
Right.
So that's a really, so you can tune the inverter, so the expansion valve in these things has to be able to go from, -5 to whatever, 80 or, the expansion valve in the heating mode for a geothermal system can be tuned just a few degrees either side of that. So it's super, super, super accurate gas modulation.
So the needing backup heat is more about like the amount of heat it has to produce rather than the outside temperature.
Right, why does geothermal need a backup? Like,
No, I thought you meant with the power quick.
Power
outage
outage backup.
I thought you said like with the power
It's really
quick.
cold. No, that's likely because
No,
Right,
oh,
yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah.
geothermal,
That's what I thought.
geothermal is
Yeah.
like doesn't heat backup.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, your
That's-
envelope
talking
has.
about power outage backup.
Oh, sorry.
It's heat
Yeah.
source and the
We
ground
thought
doesn't
it
know
sounded
that it's
like
minus
power.
25 out. It's still
Right.
55.
Right, that's what I thought, yeah.
Right.
Unless
Right.
it's at 5 months, then
Yeah,
it's
no,
not,
right.
then we have a little science fiction.
But we have dozens and dozens of people now with Mitsubishi Hyper-Heat systems, even in the pre-winter 22-23. A lot of systems had resistance backup. That's a good choice too, by the way, for a Hyper-Heat because it'll modulate. It won't turn on all 5 to 10,000 watts of resistance. It'll just modulate what it needs. It's really great. But those were never turned on even during that winter. During those lights we had.
Right, I don't think our gas system came on that winter,
Yeah,
even though like it could have.
right.
Diana has an announcement before.
Yeah, sorry. Just want to invite everyone to the Colorado Jewish Climate Summit coming up February 2nd, 2025. We did one in 2023 that a bunch of people were at. Bonet is a sponsor, Boulder JCC is a sponsor. It's down at HEA in Denver, so sometimes it can be harder to motivate the crowd of Boulder folks to motivate themselves to go down to Denver. But one of the best things that you can do at these events, I mean, so all of us here, like it's very funny, right? We all have heat pumps, right?
Yes,
So we're not,
yeah.
and I've learned a ton, which is great. Like we cut off our gas at the street, and we're 100% electric, but we are not as efficient with our electric as we could be with
Right,
all
I feel
this,
like I learned tons about
I learned a
efficiency
ton
tonight. Yeah.
of stuff. But if you come to these events, not only will you yourself be inspired and so on, but you meet people and you have these conversations and you're like, and people are shocked, like, oh, like you didn't have to turn on your gas backup furnace for a whole winter, and it's that, like actual sort of peer-to-peer conversations. And then now that we can refer people here, I think it's just super powerful. So if you all are willing to come and be ambassadors, maybe we need, I'm just thinking of this, maybe on your registration, your name tag, maybe you get a little ribbon that's ask me about my heat pumps or something. So, and we're also talking about political action, and Attorney General Weiser will be our keynote speaker, in part so that we have a whole crowd of people there saying, we want, if you ever become governor one day, we want you to focus on climate. So please come, sign up registration.
I was at I brought my car to an EV show at that.
You
event.
did, yes. Yes, it was very fun.
So are you doing an EV show again?
I'm not sure. I have to talk to Moshe.
Okay, I can help. I'm also the president of the Denver Electric Vehicle Council, and I can organize it if you want.
Oh,
Yeah, and
So
also
reach
I feel
out.
like this kind of presentation would have been great. Well, there was sort of a similar one, but this was much better.
this was much better. Yeah, I have to see. I mean, if you're available. I don't know where all the summit slots are, but this was really great.
I know, I may be calling you guys to do something
But
at
please do.
JCC.
Another thing we really encourage too is come and look at our homes. So we have, I think I had the first heat pump hot water heater, and we had ordered, I got it 5 years ago. So we have a big data set, and we have a whole bunch of other coaches with different systems. You come to my house, it's all mini splits. go to other homes, it's forced air, like we're all familiar with, or different combinations. We have different backup battery systems. I often have people come to my house just to listen to the hot water heater to see how
Oh,
loud
that's
it is.
exactly what I need to do.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's really cool. Like I had a
That's
couple
something
come
that's
over
so nice.
just 2 months ago, and the wife was really concerned, noise sensitivities. I just punched up the temperature, and I left them alone for 10 minutes, and they just sit down there, and it's really quiet. And Julia alluded to another thing. Those tanks can be, it's code in Denver. It's going to be code out here someday. What you can do with them is you put a mixing valve on them. So you can run those tanks up to 145 Fahrenheit or more. They'll get really hot. And that way you can turn like a 50-gallon tank into almost an 80-gallon as far as thermal mass. So it's a great idea. So that, the valve will just mix it back down to 122, which is optimum. So you get 122 at the taps, but you have 145 degrees in the tank. So that's a great way, kids come home from school or whatever, you have guests. So there's great ways of modulating how much energy you can get out of those tanks. Mixing valve is number one.
Yeah, because we had an estimate for a hot water heater and from Elephant Energy. And
Right.
They said they were 100% going to do that.
Right,
So-
good. Yeah, they'll do. Yeah, another thing you'll get on a quality install like Elephant, what they'll do is if they're putting in a forced air system, the things we want to see all the time now in a retrofitted older house, we want to see a 4-inch filter box. The big Alpen Air filter boxes. These 1 or 2 inch crappy little filters. With 4 inches, you can run MERV 13 in there and not restrict the blower motor. And then we also like to see improved sheet metal work. So on the central air handler, we have 90-degree turns coming in. That's a huge efficiency loss. Good installers now will round out the turns and give you 45s coming out of the intake and supply plenum. And that greatly decreases the static pressure in the unit. You can run now you can match that 3-ton outside. You can match 3 tons airflow inside the house. So again, Go Electric can advise you on all of those things.
So another
We're going to want to see
thing,
what kind of install you're
as
getting.
far as going to people's homes, another thing that Go Electric Colorado does is that we have a monthly green home tour. So
Those are fun.
you can go to Eventbrite, and I think you can look up Go Electric Colorado and get to it.
Cool.
So we do it in conjunction. We have a partner, New Energy Colorado, so we both do it. But if you guys would like to come, you can do that. And if you'd like to show your home in our green home tour, then
If you have an electric house,
that would be
please
great. Because I'm planning things for next year. So if you're interested,
because you always learn something from other people too. And we'll even talk about last thing, my favorite. I don't know if any of the other coaches do is water call up. How long does it take you to get hot water in the spigot? We have all kinds of great ideas for that too.
Yeah, my wife would love that.
Yeah. I had a consult the other day. It was 2 minutes to the master bathroom. That's like 3,000 gallons of water a year just down the drain.
So what can you do about that?
So yeah, there's great systems. If it's a sink, all the sink faucets you can go on Amazon, just order it under sink on demand electric heater.
And
plug
that's
in.
not like inefficient.
No, because it's only running in short bursts. You're going to tie that into the hot water line.
Yeah.
So down in your basement is your state-of-the-art heat pump hot water heater. Way up here, a mile away, is your master bathroom. Well, you're going to be real smart. Under the sink, you're going to put an on-demand electric hot water heater, and then you're going to put you can install a recirculating system for the shower head that's going to have a higher water demand. So 2 things here. Let's say you're just using the sink in that distant bathroom. Turn the sink on. That resistance little box under the sink initially gives you instant hot water, which is unimaginable luxury if you've never had it. But as soon as you do that, you're commanding hot water out of the big tank. So within a minute and a half or however long that call up is, when that column comes up and hits that resistance heater, it shuts it off. So the resistance heater is just running a really short burst. It'll be a negligible increase in your electric
What's this called?
bill.
This thing?
Well, there's all sorts of devices. If you come to my house, on my kitchen sink, you're going to see a Bosch Tronic 3000. Billions sold. They're in every RV in the world. It's a 2.5-gallon tank, hot water tank. Gives me instant hot water, and it's tied into the hot water tank in the base. So it's like an instant hot water. It runs. You have to watch it. It uses 2.3 kilowatt hours a month. 2 kilowatt hours a month. I get instant hot water all month long.
Tronic.
Bosch Tronic 3000. Now I'm going to warn you, if you go with the tank version, that tank it has a 2-year maintenance cycle. After 2 years, you have to crack it open, change the anode out. If you don't mind doing that, like I don't, I think it's fun. Most people, I don't want to put that on them, so I'll recommend on demand.
Yeah.
That's a tankless, it's flow through.
Who makes that?
Takes a look, everybody in the world.
Yeah, so
Reed,
on demand.
there's dozens of people make them. That takes a little heavier power demand. That's like 120, 30 amp, or even low amperage 240. So you may have to rewire your kitchen, maybe have to run another circuit up under the cabinet. But it does a bunch of things. Gives you instant hot water, saves hundreds to thousands of gallons of water a year. We're running out of water out here, out west. And it greatly reduces the cycling time in the big tank. So you're extending the life of the big tank in the basement.
Yeah.
And B, it doesn't use any electricity. My Bosch Chanukah uses 2.38 kilowatt hours a month. I don't even measure that, it's so tiny.
But you would need an outlet under that sink.
You do. Yeah. Might have to run 120, heavy 120 or a 240 up there.
Yeah.
So you're right, it's a wiring requirement, but it's worth it. If you're doing new build or reconstruction, it's absolute. You should do that. Otherwise, maybe a little bit of demolition or, that's what electricians probably snake stuff through walls and ducts and stuff like that.
That's nice.
Just throwing it out there. That's the last thing we touch on that too.